the Star Wars galaxy at this time is at an extremely dark point, and the situation for a Jedi has never been worse than what it is for Cal. So he's looking for any way to affect change, to survive, to protect the things that he cares about, and that's becoming increasingly difficult. And I think Cal is at this point where he is even questioning how it is that he's supposed to proceed and what his next move should be. And so when an opportunity seemingly presents itself for him, he's going to throw himself at it full force. And yeah, that's kind of what launches us into our story. Yeah, I think that a lot of the story of the first game was what happens when you lose your family and how can you find a new one for yourself. With this story, we say, okay, you have a family, but when the circumstances around you change, what happens when you all have different opinions on how to deal with those circumstances? What happens when you put strain on a family and on your relationships? What does that look like for these characters and their interactions? And of course, over the course of our story, we find new characters, new interactions, and we really continue to open up, Cal's relationships as well. There's a bunch of new characters that I really like what they do to shift the kind of the dynamic in the story. And in our first story, we had someone who was kind of a boy becoming a man. He doesn't have a safety net, is what I guess I can say. You know, that's a part of adulthood, is you have to live with the decisions that you make, and it's challenging, and you can be affected by them, and they can haunt you. We have a really interesting story with Cal where he's faced with challenges that are difficult, and there's not necessarily any right answers. And it's something that I always really wanted to explore with the character. It was a conversation that we had immediately after the first game, was how do we put this character in situations that are challenging, and what are the ones that are really going to push him to the point where he might break? How do we get him to that point, and what do we do from there? And what is the story that will be the most exciting, and where we can still find adventure, but also find something that is deeper and darker and more intricate and complex. So yeah, I think that we have a bunch of really big questions that we're asking with this one. It's funny because it's this dual-sided thing, right? You have an established lore, character, canon, all this stuff, and you're so excited about it and you love it, but also at the end of the day, this needs to exist and be satisfying and interesting regardless of this, right? And you want to be able to have them interact with each other, and have an interplay, but you also, it's always been important with me with our stories that the drama, the stakes, the characters should be clear regardless of whether or not you have any understanding of anything outside of it. And I want anybody who's never watched a Star Wars movie, read a Star Wars story, anything like that, to be able to jump into this and play it and still be able to understand it. And then if you do have a more experienced understanding, then you're only going to have a deepened appreciation of a lot of what's going on here. And Lucasfilm were really generous in always adding input, explaining, and helping us find our footing and where the story should be and where it should live. But yeah, it's always been really important to me to make sure that our story is satisfying on its own, and stands on its own 2 feet, and that being the priority.